Hey everyone, welcome to my next video. I'm just recording this the Truth About series, basically. Me talking about different issues and topics that maybe you're not getting the correct information about, maybe you're getting misinformation about out there. So I actually had a completely different video planned for what I'm filming, which is Tuesday night. But I decided to go a different direction because I've noticed over the last few days there's a lot of misinformation out there about a specific story. And I gotta be honest with you guys, I'm really surprised about all of the misinformation out there about the Philadelphia Eagles and this White House story. So, before we dive deep into the truth about what is really going on, I ask you to like, subscribe, share with your friends. The more we grow this platform, the more content like this I can get into with all of you who are subscribed and watching here on my YouTube channel at Josh Hennig. I'll be back with another episode of Game Night on 97.3 ESPN on Wednesday. But for now, we have this topic. And this is not really a subject we can dive too deeply into on the radio because I think a lot of people lack nuance when it comes to the general sports talk radio fan. And I say that because I'm noticing that there is an intense lack of nuance and open-minded receiving of information when it comes to people outside of the sports world. So why would anybody in the sports world be any different, right? So here's the breakdown of the story, and I'm going to give you guys the information you need to know in chronological order. Then I'm going to explain why this story, where the story came from, this false story, and where we are now. So when the Philadelphia Eagles won their first championship in the 2017 NFL season, which was 2018, was the calendar year when the Super Bowl was won by the then Philadelphia Eagles. They received, like all sports teams, an invite to the White House. Now, the invite to the White House of teams that have won championships has been a tradition of basically over 40 years, okay? This is nothing very recent. It's not like, President Obama or President Trump or President W. Bush came up with this idea out of nowhere. This has been going on for a very long time, that teams have visited the White House when they've won championships. It's become a tradition. Well, back in 2018, there were individuals on the Philadelphia Eagles who were very anti-President Trump. Okay, President Trump, when he had become president, he did so in an environment that was divisive. And he had made comments, President Trump, before he was elected and then after he was elected about certain NFL players in terms of the Kaepernick stuff and that whole fiasco, that some players did not agree with, some of the players misinterpreted. So there were members of the Eagles team that when the team was invited to go to the White House said, we're not going. The Philadelphia Eagles organization never said no to the invitation, okay? Now, there have been sports teams as a collective that chose not to go to the White House. For example, the Golden State Warriors, when they won an NBA championship, when they were invited to see President Trump at the White House, the organization, the collective, said no one of the times. But the Eagles' individual players did. So let's get that first out in the open. Now, let's jump back to current day. There was a story that came out. Now, the original story actually came out about a week ago. But it started building momentum. Okay, there's a British tabloid called The Sun. Now, The Sun claimed it had a source with the Philadelphia Eagles that said that they were going to say no if they were invited to the White House after winning the championship. Then that original story, and let's be realistic. Anytime you go with tabloid reporting, you got to be realizing you're dealing with sketchy information, okay? That story evolved from if they are invited, they will say no, to they've already been invited and they said no. So now we got whispering on a lane going on. And again, this is no one reputable, okay? This isn't Mike Garafolo of NFL Network, Adam Schefter of ESPN, Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports. This isn't any of the major reporters. Also, none of the Eagles beat reporters repeated any of this, okay? Then, on Monday, as the story started to build, people who cover the Eagles, okay, people who are boots on the ground, started to report that this story was basically fake news. It was people like John McMullen of Jacob Media's Bird 365. It was people like Zach Berman of Philly. It was different people who cover the team, Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports, and others. And it started building more and more that more and more people who cover the team said this story isn't real. Then, I want to say about 12 hours after the Eagles beat reporter started putting this counter reporting out there to this, what basically became a built-up internet rumor. Clay Travis of Outkick and a couple other, shall I call them, conservative media individuals reached out to the White House and President Trump's people directly and asked them about the story. To which they said, "We have not sent out the invitation yet. We have not received a decline of an invitation. And thanks for asking," basically. And then President Trump came out earlier today on Tuesday and basically reiterated the same information. And the Eagles, through different outlets, basically have come out and said if they are invited, they would be honored to go. But the problem is, because there was a gap of time between the truth coming out and the initial false reporting was out, there are all kinds of people who have created narratives and storylines all over the internet in both political directions. And this is the toxicity of politics have basically infected the sports world. Because the problem with this whole story is that something that should have never been true, something should have never been circulated, reported, disseminated, aggregated, whatever term you want to use, the reality is it should have been completely dismissed out of hand. Because we have now come to find out, according to different reports, that the same quote-unquote source that told The Sun, the British tabloid, that the Eagles were never going to go to the White House if they were invited, was the same source that told people in different tabloids that Nick Sirianni is going to be fired after the bye week when the team went 2-2. Well, that's convenient. It's a convenient piece of the story that's not being talked about. The source of all of this is incorrect multiple times now. So, why did this story catch on like wildfire? To the point where I saw people who I feel like I respect in the media get carried away in this story. Well, it's because of the toxicity of politics, but it's also ignoring the reason why this story came out in the first place. And if I've learned anything in life, as someone who's worked in the media for over 20 years, we have two different rules that I was trained to go by. The first rule is the rule of two. So when I first got into the business and we started dealing with breaking news stories, whether it's sports, politics, whatever, it was called the rule of two. If you are getting information second or third hand, the rule of two says find two reputable reports that corroborate the information before You, in this case me, publish it, declare it, aggregate it, disseminate it, share it, whatever. You never, ever, ever, is what I was trained, you never, ever, ever, ever are the person who tries to be first to the story. You always want to be right about the story. The second key that we are always taught is ask why about everything. The why is everything. So we already saw that a lot of people violated rule number 1. And I mean a lot of people. People who are supposed to know better, okay? Major media outlets, smaller media outlets, tons of people across the everything. The mainstream media, the internet, people on YouTube, people on different platforms all over the place. I mean, I'm talking about people from CNN to Fox News to Newsmax and Outkick to MSNBC and Politico and numerous others, right? People turn this into this story, and the kid found out it was all fake. So why? Well, the why is the real truth that we're going to break into here. Because the why has to do with who are the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles. The 2024 Philadelphia Eagles team has been a team that has been doubted, dismissed, underestimated, lied about. I mean, we've had stories all year about Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and many others on this team that people have put out misinformation about basically since last summer. And this team endured all of the noise to win a championship. So why were people so intent to hate on the Eagles? Well, we know one reason for it is because Nick Sirianni is perceived in a very negative light. Nick Sirianni, the Eagles head coach, is an individual who is, shall I call it, unique, different, does not follow the mold of a traditional football coach. He is very emotional. He is very expressive. He is not the greatest linguist. You know, one of the traditional stereotypes of professional football coaches has been you're either stoic and you give out no information, or you're charismatic and you're like an amazing communicator, all right? It's the difference between Bill Belichick and Dick Vermeil. Bill Belichick, people like him and others, stoic, don't give out a lot of information. They're football 24/7. And then you get the more charismatic types like Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells, you know, he loved the mess with the New York media. He was infamous for it. And he was, you know, very colorful in some of his descriptions. But he was very well spoken, Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells tried to act like he was stupid. But he was actually secretly a genius, the way he manipulated the media and narratives and different stuff like that. So historically, coaches have fit into one of those boxes. And Nick Sirianni doesn't fit into either box. Nick Sirianni is emotional like a Dick Vermeil, but he's not very well spoken. He kind of trips over his words. He's clunky. He's awkward. He's obviously never really taken a legitimate public speaking class in his life. He's kind of learning as he goes. And sometimes he puts his foot in his mouth. And sometimes he does and says stuff that kind of looks like he shouldn't be saying or doing, right? Or doesn't fit in with the mold of what we expect of a football coach. And then you have the Eagles quarterback, the opposite of Sirianni. Jalen Hurts acts like how the coach is expected to act. Stoic, not giving out a lot of information. We keep the main thing the main thing. The standard is the standard. I'm here to win ball games, not put up stats. You know, all the cliches. He's got them all. But because he has no emotion compared to his head coach, the perception is they clash, they don't like each other. Again, a made-up narrative. And then you have A.J. Brown. Oh, he's got to be a diva. Find out that he's not. He wants the ball. Actually, he doesn't really want the ball all the time. He was against Saquon Barkley ever coming here. He doesn't like them running the ball that much. Not true. There was a concerted effort to... Oh, and can I add one more? Vic Fangio. He failed in Miami. He's always going to be a loser. Players don't like him. All the Eagle players love him. Just the Dolphin players don't like him. Well, he can never be Patrick Mahomes. Well, I went through all 8 games he lost to the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes actually only had 3 good games against him. The other 5 games, the Chiefs' defense was dominant over some Fangio-coached teams that were not very good. A lot of narratives, a lot of storylines, a lot of stirring of the pot. Why is that? Well, we come to find out that in today's toxic political environment, a controversial characteristic of human beings today is their religion. And this is really where it all breaks down. You may not know this because the mainstream media or your favorite talk host or your favorite YouTube channel, your favorite news network doesn't want to talk about it. But there are a lot of players on the Philadelphia Eagles who claim to be Christians. There's a lot of players in the Eagles who talk about prayer, talk about their relationship with God, talk about how God has been important to them in their life. Saquon Barkley told the media that, when he started going to therapy and he started focusing more on his faith and less on his stats, that's when he had the greatest amount of success in his career this year. And he credits his relationship with God and him refocusing on his faith for the Eagles' success. A.J. Brown said that he went through a very dark time in his life, and when he started having more communication, a better relationship with God, and started praying more, that he was able to become a better person, a better, more productive player. Jalen Hurts has constantly credited God for his success, and that it's all God's plan for everything that happens in his life. Nick Sirianni has credited God, and many other players have done so as well. And I don't want to get into a whole, let's name off all the players who have talked about God on the Eagles. But it's a very interesting point because I just named a bunch of players who are people who are considered very controversial. There's a lot of negative information out there about them. But it's convenient that they're all the ones who talk about God. And we live in a world today where being religious, having faith, talking about God and all these different elements that come with that, okay, different conversations, different topics people don't want to talk about. Because there's not really much hot takery for those topics. It's more like a, all right, thanks for sharing, next question, kind of reaction to them. Because of that, there was a dynamic created of people wondering, well, if the Eagles, their religious preferences, we'll call it, okay, and again, I'm trying to paint this in a certain way so I understand where I'm going with it. Would that mean they would go to the White House? Because just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you voted for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or either one. What your personal beliefs are your personal beliefs. And I believe that a lot of the Eagle players, voted for either one of those candidates. I can't confirm or deny who they voted for. Excuse me. And then the story came out about, Jalen Hurts thinks President Barack Obama is the greatest president of all time. And that story has to be debunked. So, Jalen Hurts ran into the former president at a golf outing several months ago. Actually, during the summer months, last summer. And, he was invited to join the golf outing. He said, I can't because in my contract I'm not allowed to play competitive golf. I can only play, recreational here and there. So the former president, said, whenever that contract is up, we can play. And according to people who were there, not aggregated reporting in second, third hand accounts, I mean people who were there, say that Jalen Hurts basically told the former president that he would kick his you-know-what on the golf course. Later, Jalen Hurts told the media that he described the former President Obama as an all-time leader in terms of his character traits and thinks he has a real positive vibe to him. Never did he say he was the greatest president. Never did he say that he was in love or thought Obama's the best or whatever. He just had some positive things to say about a president after he told him he was going to kick his butt on the golf course. So apparently that was the genesis of the Eagles players having an anti-President Trump in the White House position, when we have no evidence of that. Furthermore, there has been a concerted effort by many members of the mainstream media to ignore, cover up, and censor many of the Eagles players' religious beliefs, many of the Eagles players' personal beliefs when it comes to the community and social issues. There has been a mute button on anything involving in charity. In fact, Jalen Hurts was just honored recently because, for those who don't know, in Philadelphia, there were a lot of schools over the years that would have to close school because it would be too hot certain months of the year. Jalen Hurts personally raised money and spent that money to buy new air conditioning units for all of those Philadelphia schools to make sure that the kids can still go to school during the hot months and the school doesn't get canceled or postponed because of the lack of air conditioning. No one talks about that. No one talks about all the charity work the Philadelphia Eagle players do, all the good things they do in the community. It's all about, does Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts get along? And it's very convenient that nobody talks about anything good about the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm convinced that it is because these players don't fit into nice, neat little boxes. Because the mainstream media, national media types who have agendas cannot take these men and put them into a right versus left debate. They can't put them into a... They can't create a true story about the players because it'd be too positive. It'd be too good. So we got to make stuff up. We got to put out stories about how this person hates that guy and that guy hates this guy, but none of it's true. And it brings us to the conclusion. We have to remember to check the source of news stories and reports. The rule of two, as we do in the media, let's corroborate the story. If you can't corroborate it, why are we running with it? Why are we sharing? Why are we posting it on every platform? And this goes for anybody. Okay, I have people who I know who voted for President Trump who are sharing this false story. I know people who voted against the current president, voted for Kamala Harris, who were sharing this story. There are people wondering, why is this story out there, and ignoring the real issue, which is a lot of people just don't like the Philadelphia Eagles and did not buy into them and didn't believe in them, and now they were embarrassed. And the team won Super Bowl 59 over the beloved Kansas City Chiefs. Because apparently a lot of people in the national media love the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know maybe it's the Taylor Swift factor, maybe it's the Travis Kelce factor, or maybe it's people just want to see history. I don't know. I'm not in possession of the all the information on that. Okay, excuse me. But what I can tell you is this: we would not be having this same conversation about the Kansas City Chiefs. Because the Chiefs would just be assumed to be going to the White House and it'd be no big deal. But because the Eagles players did this 7 years ago, because there is a negative perception of the Philadelphia Eagles team, because the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, Jeffrey Lurie, has been a long-time Democratic Party contributor, even though he has never overtly placed his own position of Trump versus Harris in the last presidential election. Because people were just kind of like pulling at tiny little bits of information. They tried to bring it together and create this. Look at this story. There are a lot of people who are tricked, manipulated, misled. Because it's a lot easier to click share on a random post than it is to actually do a little research. And I've personally been involved in many of these conversations. I remember the rumor years ago that Nick Foles was going to get traded to the Eagles when he was still playing. And I kept telling people, there's literally one guy reporting this. A never heard of him before reporter from Chicago who was claiming the Bears, when Nick Foles was there, was going to trade him back to Philadelphia. Story ended up being completely false. But you know what? That share button's real easy. That send it to a friend is real easy. And what's a shame is that instead of people sharing and distributing truth, if it's salacious enough, and if it's exciting enough, and it's enticing enough, they'll hit share on that. But not on the truth. Not on what really happened with the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles. Keep that in mind the next time you see a story. And question, why is there only one person reporting this? Where does this story come from? Why are people so excited to propagate this information? Remember, there are agendas, and there are people who like clicks, and those people typically don't care one bit about the truth. Thank you for watching this conversation about the Eagles and the false story about them, the White House. As of the filming of this video, the White House has not officially sent the invite to the Philadelphia Eagles. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, as well as White House media people have told the media that they will be sending an invite to the Eagles in the near future. No specific timeline about when they will send it or when the Eagles would come to the White House. My working assumption would be a lot of NFL teams like to do those kind of visits in the off-season. A lot of times teams will like to do it during off-season training activities because it's typically the one time a year that all the players are together, but it's not hyper essential for them all to be on the practice field preparing for the season. Historically, NFL teams do not do White House visits during an NFL season, so my expectation would be whenever the White House sends out this invitation, you'll probably see the Eagles go there probably in like late May, early June, or late July, early August, maybe that kind of time frame. Low likelihood, maybe before Labor Day, but that's probably the timetable we're talking about. And again, we're filming this video at the last week of February. So, and I'm sure there will be players and people who will speak out about this whole false story, because I'm sure people are going to be asked about it in the coming months. So, again, thank you for watching. If you enjoy these conversations, like I did last week about Captain America Brave New World, I have other topics coming out about health and fitness, as well as sports, media, as well as comic book movies, TV shows. I have a lot of topics I have written down. If you like these conversations, share it with people, like and subscribe, so we can build an audience for this kind of content, because I want to bring you guys the truth. I want to bring you the facts. I don't want to play into agendas or narratives or what people want to hear. I know there's a lot of people who like to drum up a lot of emotional reactions to stories and topics, and I'm not here for that. I'm here to get back to old school journalism. Alexander Hamilton once said that if the media is not willing to tell the truth, then who will? In response to the Alien Sedition Acts, when President John Adams wanted to completely stifle the media and any opposition to any of his policies and his beliefs. And it's very funny that history seems to repeat itself, because in today's world there's been a very intense effort in the last 10 years for mainstream media and new media, digital media, streaming platforms to fall in line with people's agendas. And so it's very interesting that we are slowly starting to see people be willing to ask the question why. That's what I'm here for. Thanks for watching. Take care, everyone. I'll catch you on my next show on 97.3 ESPN for Game Night with me, Josh Hennig.